Tensions between Japan and China are rising. China cited active United Nations provisions and even suggested possible military action against Japan. They also criticized Japan, calling it an ultra-nationalist state. Today, let's take a closer look at this issue. Let's get started. Before we begin, this video wouldn't exist without your interest and support. Please hit the subscribe button now so we can create more content together. China recently made a shocking statement. Pu Chong, China's ambassador to the United Nations, explained China's stance on Prime Minister Takaichi's comments and urged a retraction in a letter to United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on November 21. He stated the following. Ambassador Pu Chong told the United Nations that Prime Minister Takaichi's comments mark Japan's first open military ambition over Taiwan and its first direct challenge to China's core interests. He called the remarks extremely wrong, dangerous, and malicious in nature and impact. He went on to emphasize that if Japan dares to attempt military intervention in the Taiwan Strait situation, it would be considered an act of aggression. He stressed that China will firmly exercise its right to self-defense in accordance with the United Nations Charter and international law, and will resolutely safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity. A Xinhua news agency report says the letter will be sent to all United Nations General Assembly member states as an official document. China is sharply criticizing Japan by citing relevant provisions, so we must closely monitor them. The United Nations allows founding members like the United States, France, and the United Kingdom to take military action without Security Council approval if fascist or ultranationalist countries like Germany, Italy, or Japan pursue aggression again. The United Nations, founded by the World War II allied powers, still has these provisions. Recently, China referenced them, suggesting it could attack Japan in an emergency. The Chinese embassy in the Philippines quickly posted a cartoon on X, accusing Takaichi of burning the peace constitution, reviving ultranationalism, and suggesting military intervention in the Taiwan Strait. They warned that China would retaliate if that happened. Chinese state media have intensified their attacks, warning of possible war. To trace China's hardline stance, we should examine Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks. Prime Minister Takaichi said they'll use collective self-defense if China invades Taiwan. China saw this as a major provocation. After the statement on collective self-defense, China responded with harsh rhetoric and criticized Japan. Japan is also reacting to China's criticism and aggression with its own hardline stance. For example, Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi is showing a tough attitude, saying that he will not retract his statement. China's aggressive actions, especially in Japan, are increasing anti-China sentiment. Prime Minister Takaichi's approval rating is rising. Within Japan's Liberal Democratic Party, many believe that Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks were somewhat inappropriate, but since public sentiment is turning toward Prime Minister Takaichi, they are actively trying to support him. A Kyodo News poll this month showed Prime Minister Takaichi's approval rating increased 5 points to 69.9%. Most people support Prime Minister Takaichi. China remains aggressive toward Japan. On November 19, Chinese diplomatic authorities notified Japan of a ban on the import of Japanese seafood. China has fully banned Japanese seafood imports since contaminated water was released from Fukushima Daiichi in August 2023. In June, China chose to resume imports and began on November 5. After Prime Minister Takaichi mentioned military intervention if Taiwan is invaded, imports were suspended again 2 weeks later. China is increasing pressure on Japan and appears to be targeting it more. Actions against Korea and Japan have also been taken. They urged people not to study abroad or travel to Japan and banned Japanese movies, anime, and screenings in China. China is a key player in Japan's tourism and study abroad markets. Japan National Tourism Organization reported on November 18 that foreign visitors from January to October rose 17.7% year over year to about 35.53 million. China led major countries with the most visitors to Japan and the highest growth rate. Around 8.2 million Chinese visited, up 40.7% from the previous year, making China number one. About 7.66 million Koreans visited Japan, up 6.4%. But when this was blocked, Japan suffered a certain amount of economic damage. It also affected the study abroad market. As of May 2024, there are a total of 123,485 Chinese students studying in Japan. That's 36.7% of all international students, but this is expected to drop. Japan will likely face economic damage. However, since foreign crime is currently low in Japan, many Japanese people are actually welcoming the fact that Chinese people are not coming to Japan. Many Chinese people are now coming to Korea due to the visa waiver and continue criticizing movies. China had scheduled the theatrical release of Crayon Shin-chan and Cells at Work for December 6th, but then suddenly suspended their screenings. China Central Television reported the decision was made after assessing Japanese films' market performance and audience sentiment. China's ban on Japanese content is now comprehensive, with the United States and Taiwan quietly backing Japan. Tommy Picot, the United States State Department spokesperson, stressed their alliance and reaffirmed unwavering support for Japan's defense, including the Senkaku Islands. President Lai Ching-te of Taiwan showed support for Japan by sharing a photo of himself eating sushi made with Japanese seafood. Also, Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong expressed a general view in an interview with Bloomberg, saying that he hopes both China and Japan will find ways to ease the current tensions for the stability of Asia. Since then, Southeast Asian countries, including Singapore, have continued to express indirect support for Japan by stating that they support Japan playing a larger role in the region, including in the area of security. The number of countries aligning with Japan is gradually increasing, but despite this growing solidarity, China continues to take an aggressive stance. On the 21st, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning warned that if Japan abandons peaceful development and returns to militarism or disrupts the post-war order, China and the international community will not tolerate it. She warned it will end in failure. Japan considered hosting a trilateral summit with Korea and China next January, but China refused, citing the Japanese Prime Minister's inadequate response. China keeps refusing to talk with Japan in an agitated way. They even postponed the Korea-China-Japan Culture Ministers meeting scheduled for November 24th in Macau. The G20 summit is currently in South Africa, but Japan and China have no scheduled meetings. The reason China is overreacting to this situation is ultimately directly related to the Taiwan issue. Japan's talk of military intervention is noted, but China mainly worries about Japan serving as a key rear base if a Taiwan crisis occurs. In fact, in various cross-the-strait war scenarios presented by different think tanks, analyses repeatedly point out that the reason China is wary of Japan is not simply due to historical sentiments, but because of the role Japan would play in a Taiwan scenario. If conflict erupts in the Taiwan Strait, southern Japan regions like Okinawa, Yonaguni, and Miyako would be the first battle zones. Before the United States carrier strike groups, Marines, and mobile units are deployed, this region will serve as an initial response outpost. Because of this, China's operational plans have to take Japanese territory into account from the very beginning. This is what makes China uncomfortable. If China invades Taiwan, United States bases in Okinawa will respond at once. Even a minor error by China could prompt swift United States support and lead to China's downfall. From China's perspective, in order to invade Taiwan, they must block the routes for Japan and the United States to intervene as much as possible within the first 48 hours, and the United States military bases in Okinawa, Japan, are considered the primary targets to strike first. China's strong warnings to Japan highlight how intense the Taiwan Strait power struggle is. In the end, although this conflict appears to be a diplomatic clash between China and Japan, the prevailing interpretation is that it is essentially a preliminary confrontation in the scenario of a Taiwan war. China worries Japan could become a gateway for war intervention, while Japan must strengthen United States ties to deter China's efforts to forcibly unify Taiwan. From this perspective, the current situation is not an emotional confrontation between the two countries, but rather a scene where the strategic structure surrounding Taiwan has been exposed. For Japan, if Taiwan falls to China, national security will change entirely. Japan mainly worries that if China takes Taiwan, it could allow China to move into the Western Pacific. Until now, the United States and Japan have been able to partially block the movements of the Chinese Navy through the Taiwan-Okinawa axis, but if Taiwan falls, this defensive line will collapse. The Chinese Navy will gain freer sea routes, while Japan's southwestern islands will be enclosed in a pressure belt. Japan's missile defense and maritime self-defense force range will decrease, increasing security risks as they enter China's offensive zone. On top of this, there are economic issues as well. The main artery of Japan's trade passes through the Taiwan Strait. Crude oil, liquefied natural gas, raw materials, finished products, and logistics, the vast sea route that Japan's economy depends on, could come under China's control. If China uses military pressure or claims the Taiwan Strait as its sphere of influence, Japan's economy will face a major shock and its energy security will depend on China's strategy. Due to this structure, Japan sees Taiwan's current status as vital to its survival. China is shaking up this order aggressively, and Japan is faced with the reality that it must resist this trend somehow, rather than simply being dragged along. The conflict between Japan and China is expected to intensify. What do you think about the current situation? Please share your thoughts in the comments as well. That concludes the video. Thank you.